Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you again, going live at a random time, of course, because it's Selection Sunday. I haven't done this before. I mean, I've only been doing this channel for like a year and a half. So I did one March Madness on this channel last year, but figured I would just because I'm obsessed with March Madness. I figured I would just give like an early reaction to the bracket, so we can talk about that. Not any official plays yet. I do have a few leans already that may turn into plays, especially one particular one, which I'll probably just give out on this show because I'm probably going to bet it. Fuck today, by the way, 0-3, even though the hockey game's not over yet. It is over, if you know what I mean. Fuck all three teams that I bet today, especially the Hawks, who had the lead in the second half, and somehow the Nets hit almost 50% from three-point range in that game, and the Hawks blew the second half lead. I understand their defense sucks, but that was a bad spot for Brooklyn, a team that doesn't have anything to play for at this point. Hawks did have something to play for, had the lead in the second half, and totally imploded in the fourth quarter. Fuck that. Phoenix obviously had a terrible start, and then they got back into the game a bit, but it wasn't enough. And then I don't know what is going on in that hockey game, but fuck the Ducks. They suck. A bunch of rhymes there. Let's talk about this bracket, man. So I'm going to let's look at the bracket itself here, man, because, of course, the bracket was released. There are definitely some shockers in here, and I don't mean Wichita State. Those shockers certainly had no chance and were nowhere near this field. And by the way, I will be probably having some bets in the NIT, and I usually don't touch the other tournaments, but there are actually three other tournaments now. I think the CIT, the CBI, and there's a new one, the CBC or something, the College Basketball Crown, which I think is in Las Vegas. I have no idea. I think it's like a 16-team tournament, so these teams continue to get to play, even if they're not in the big dance. NIT, by the way, well, we can talk about this bracket, and I'll tell you like how it like kind of plays into the NIT plays as well, and I'll give some like ways of kind of playing March Madness tournament games as well, some just general ideas about how these games play out in some ways. So, of course, the big shocker came almost right away in this first region here, which is the South region. I mean, Auburn is the number one overall seed. Obviously, we all expected that. No shock with any of the one seeds or anything like that. The biggest shock was this play-in game here against Ole Miss, which is North Carolina getting in. Where do they show that? Down here. North Carolina against San Diego State. So that's the big thing. Nobody really expected North Carolina to get in. And my bracketology, I got 66 out of the 68 teams, which is basically, I think, what essentially all the bracketologies got correct. And they all pretty much had the same, I think, pretty much the same two teams in for the most part that didn't get in, and the same two teams out that did get in, which are North Carolina and Texas. North Carolina, yeah, I mean, I looked at the betting odds like 5 minutes before the bracket release show started, and North Carolina was minus 800 to not get in. So apparently they really kept this bracket under wraps. I know in 2016, there was that leak on Twitter. Somebody leaked the actual bracket, and some people didn't even believe it was the real thing, which it was. Since then, they've really kept this thing under wraps, and it has not happened since then. And it's to the point where even the betting markets were going crazy in a certain direction, and then the actual bracket came out and was totally in the other direction. So North Carolina had gone up to a minus 800 favorite to not make this thing, and Indiana was minus 2,000 to get in, and they didn't get in. So it's just insane, really. And Indiana, I think, wasn't even the first team out. West Virginia was the first team out. So Indiana and West Virginia were the two teams I had in that did not get in. I had Indiana so far in that I didn't even have them in the first four. They were deep in, man. They were really fucking this bracket. I had them in the round of 64, and they didn't even get in at all. I mean, their resume wasn't really that good, but just based on what I thought was going to happen, that's what I thought was going to happen. I mean, North Carolina they're like 1-12 in quad one. I know quad one is kind of whatever. Like, if it was up to me and it was just based on the metrics, I would have had North Carolina and Ohio State in, because that's, Ken Palm has them both kind of in the 30 to 40 range, which usually the like top teams that get left out of the tournament are usually kind of right around that ballpark. And Northwestern isn't that far behind that, but Northwestern without Barnheiser, I mean, I have no problem with them not getting, and nobody even discussed them as being a team that would get in. But anyway, because North Carolina is going to be the team that gets shit on, like the team that shouldn't get in, really. Like they're going to be the one team that everybody says shouldn't get in. We've seen that happen multiple times. In recent memory, I kind of remember Syracuse was one of those teams. They were a 10 seed, and I think they made it all the way to the Elite Eight or maybe even the Final Four, whichever year that was. So that happened. And then there was another year where Ohio State was, I think it was Ohio State, was just like, oh, like how did this team get in at all? And then they, I think, went on like a nice mini run as well. And a lot of times those teams will at least win the first game that they play because it's an extra motivator, right? You didn't even think you were going to get in, and then you get in. So you're basically like free rolling, and you have that chip on your shoulders. People are like, this team doesn't even belong here, man. And they're playing against the San Diego State team, who is probably not thrilled at where they're at here, man, because San Diego State, I think they thought they were going to be in the tournament more like comfortably than they are. And now they have to face a blue blood in North Carolina, which, I mean, they're going to be maybe excited to step up and play North Carolina, but maybe not because they're playing this team that wasn't even supposed to get in. As you can see here, North Carolina is a 3.5-point favorite, which I think they're actually up to 4 already. I might actually bet this one because, like I said, on North Carolina, lay the points. That's the way I would look in this game because, again, like a team is going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder if they're like North Carolina and they were supposed to not get in at all. So that's the way I look there. And then I wouldn't be surprised if they end up like making a run in this tournament. And actually, where are they at? They'd be against Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss, and I kind of like, I mean, they have a decent coach with Chris Beard. But they're an SEC team, and I think we may see some of the SEC teams being a little bit overvalued, man, in the first round. I think the like very best of the best SEC teams are really that good, and I think they might be able to make it far in this thing. But I think we might see some of the like lesser SEC teams drop out early and be kind of more of like the public teams. So there are a lot of games that are actually kind of like the non-SEC teams in a lot of these. I don't know about this Ole Miss one, but if it's Ole Miss against North Carolina, I think it is going to be a close line. And then the thing about this is the teams that win the play-in round, and I talked about this last year when I played Colorado against Florida. Colorado had won one of the play-in games. Then they were up against a Florida team that was without Hangloten, their big man, so that kind of hurt them a little bit. But when you have a team that already played that one game in the tournament, like I talked about with the conference tournaments, they get that first game out of the way and they get that under their belt. So they tend to be at a little bit of an advantage to that extent that the pressure is kind of off them a little bit. They already got one of the tournament games out of the way, and now they just have a little bit of momentum, whereas the other team's kind of coming in cold, and that other team doesn't know which team they're going to prepare for. Whereas if you're North Carolina, yeah, you got to prepare for this first game and win against San Diego State, but then you know that at least if you win this game, you're going to be playing Ole Miss, whereas Ole Miss doesn't even know which one of these teams to prepare for. And these are some different style of teams, man. San Diego State plays slow. North Carolina plays fast. I think I'm overanalyzing this one game, but whatever. This game's going to be in Dayton as well, so I think that's also maybe a little bit of a disadvantage to San Diego State because they don't tend to go that far east, being in the Mountain West, although it won't be that bad because it's a late night game, so whatever. It's still going to be an evening game by their biological clock, so it's not going to be that bad. And they know they have to travel out there, and they have rest. So, I mean, the rest advantage isn't really going to be huge one way or the other. But, I mean, that's the way that I kind of look at that one game there. I'll talk about the 16 seed games on the day that they're played, really, because I almost never bet those games. I mean, those games are real crapshoots for the most part. But anyway, yeah, so North Carolina, I wouldn't be like, I expect them to win this game and then against San Diego State. And then it wouldn't shock me if they actually made a little bit of a run into this tournament. And we know these 11 seeds actually tend to make runs because the tournament just sets up decently for the 11 seed to actually make it a little bit further than some of the other seeds because they get to play like the 6 and the 3. So they tend to be playing somewhat lesser competition than like 2 seeds and 1 seeds and stuff. So that's what we have going on there. And by the way, before I forget, I was going to say, because those teams that didn't get in that really thought they were going to be in, especially Indiana, and that's like a blue blood program, even though they're not a blue color, but like a team like Indiana, they expect to be in the tournament, man. And they missed the tournament when they really thought they were going to be in. They were a heavy favorite to get in. If they even accept it, I hope they do, because a lot of these teams just reject the NIT invitation. I think Ohio State actually played in the NIT last year, and Ohio State would be another one of these teams this year who is going to be disappointed because they're a program that expects to get in, but Indiana even more so because right up until the bracket was released, they thought they were going to get in. And then once the final region was being talked about, I knew they weren't going to get in because you knew Drake had to be in one of those spots, and then the other spot you pretty much knew was going to go to Arkansas. So I'm like, yeah, Indiana's not in. So if Indiana does play in the NIT, I would look to fade them in the first round. I mean, they might win the game, but they're probably going to be a favorite against a lesser team. And that's the way to look at the NIT is when you have a program that's always expecting to be in the actual tournament. They're a big name program like Indiana, and they expect to get in until that last second, and then they fall into the NIT. You want to look to fade that team, man, because they're going to be disappointed. They don't necessarily really want to be there. And then the other team that they're playing is probably going to be more excited to be there because they're just excited to play like a big name team, really, even if it's not in the big dance. Oh, we get to play against Indiana. Like, that's pretty exciting, right? It's the next most exciting thing to actually getting to play in the tournament. So I would look to fade, Indiana especially, but maybe like Ohio State if they play in the NIT as well. And then who are the other teams? West Virginia. I don't know about West Virginia, though, because West Virginia really had low expectations this year, and they actually kind of exceeded their expectations this year because they're like in a rebuilding mode. They have a new coach there in DeVries who came over from Drake, and they probably would have made the tournament if his son, Tucker DeVries, the player, really good player who played at Drake, if he didn't get hurt early in the season and never come back, West Virginia probably would have had a few more wins, and they'd probably be in this thing. So that does kind of suck for them. So maybe in that respect, they'd be disappointed, but I think less so than Indiana would be the team I'd really be targeting to fade in the first game of the NIT. Anyway, nobody wants to hear about the NIT, but that's just the way that I look at it. Back to these games. I think this Auburn region actually sets up fairly nicely for Auburn. I mean, my thoughts on some of these other games, Louisville's a little bit of a favorite here against Creighton. And actually we can look at what's going on with some of these lines here. Let me see. Louisville actually down from 3 to 2.5. This game is in Lexington, Kentucky, though, where if you're not familiar with that area, like Creighton may not be, maybe some of those guys are going to be hitting the Dave Portnoy glory holes there and maybe a little bit distracted there, especially because Creighton's best player is Cockbrenner. So he's going to be maybe putting his Cockbrenner over in the glory holes there in Lexington, Kentucky. I don't know, but this is being played at Rupp Arena. Louisville is way more familiar with that venue. They play there because they have the rivalry against Kentucky. So I think a lot of times they play Kentucky in the out of conference. Did they play them this year? I don't know if they did, but that's something to look at as well. But either way, Louisville's playing really close to home here, man, in Lexington, Kentucky. So it seems like they should have like a crowd advantage there. So I would kind of lean towards Louisville getting that game. But then even though the crowd will be there for the game against Auburn, I don't really expect Auburn to lose this. I think this region sets up nicely for Auburn, man. And then UC San Diego, they're going to be a trendy pick, man. I'm not necessarily sure that I really like that, even though Michigan is a small favorite here in a 12-5. Everybody loves the 12-5s, man, but the 12-5s have kind of dropped off a little bit. The 12s had done pretty well, but since 2018, the 5 seeds are 16-8 straight up against the 12 seeds. So they win 2/3 of the game since then, which is about what you would expect from the 12 seeds, or from the 5 seeds over the 12s. I mean, so no real huge advantage there. And as far as this one is concerned, I don't know that I would really want to look at UC San Diego here, man, even though, where are they? San Diego, come on, man. There they are. Michigan's actually down from 3 to 2.5 with juice. It is definitely a short line for a 12-5 game, but I don't know if I love it, man, even though Michigan did have to play today. So UC San Diego has a little bit of a rest edge because they played last night, and Michigan won the conference tournament. And a lot of times when a team wins the conference tournament and they were going to get in anyway, they're a little bit tired because they just went on that run. But UC San Diego, well, I guess UC San Diego does have a rest advantage because they only played 2 games in the Big West tournament. They had to bye into the semifinals. Michigan only played 3 games, though, so really the rest advantage isn't that strong. It's not like they went on a run of 5 games, which NC State did, and they still made the Final Four last year, so who even knows, man? So I don't think there's really going to be a huge rest edge one way or the other, but Michigan is definitely going to have the experience edge, and that's what worries me about UC San Diego here. Even though, they're a good team, and they could take teams by surprise. They hit a lot of threes, so teams that hit a lot of threes, take a lot of threes, do have upset potential. You want teams that like play slow usually and take a lot of threes. And I do think UC San Diego qualifies actually for both of those things. So yeah, they are definitely a potential upset team, but I don't know about this matchup, man. Like I said, I think Michigan's maybe a little bit underseeded. I mean, they won the Big 10, and then the knock on them was that, oh, Michigan's not that good because they win all these close games. Yeah, I agree. Like, Ken Palm's going to have them high in the luck index because they win a lot of close games, so maybe their record isn't as good as maybe the record is better than what it should be. But because they played all these close games, that makes them more like tournament ready. That means that they're more used to playing close games, and they were playing against way better competition than UC San Diego was, man. So that's the thing about that game. Michigan is definitely battle tested, and they have Dusty May there, and he is used to coaching in the tournament, man, because he was at FAU. So even though I think they lost in the first round last year, and I think I picked against them in my bracket last year with Northwestern, they blew that game really, but I actually bet on FAU in the first round against Memphis. We'll talk about Memphis shortly in the previous tournament before that. So I do think Michigan does have an experience edge there, because their coach is more has more pedigree, really, and they got some players that have more tournament pedigree. They're UC San Diego. This is literally the first season that they're even eligible to be in the tournament. So they obviously have no pedigree, no experience doing it. So it is going to be unfamiliar territory for them. Although, on the other hand, that does mean they could be pretty excited, like kind of what we saw with like Duquesne last year. It's like Duquesne, well, they didn't even expect to be in the tournament, though, and they won the A-10 tournament last year, got in. That was a program that hadn't been to the tournament for a long time. They were excited, and they slowed down the game against BYU and took BYU by surprise and won the game. I don't know if UC San Diego would quite be in that position, because they did expect to win their conference like once the season got going, and they were playing lesser competition and fewer close games, really, where Michigan was just playing close games in like a gauntlet of a schedule. So I would hesitate a little bit on UC San Diego there. Texas A&M and Yale. A&M is laying 7.5, and the thing about that is, and it's down, or no, it's up a little bit, I guess, from even money to minus 105. Not a huge move there. Yale, like I mentioned, they do have a couple of guys who were on that Yale team last year that upset Auburn, but people might remember that, maybe overvalue Yale a little bit for that reason, thinking, oh, Yale pulled off the upset last year. Yale definitely, could potentially do it. There are reasons why they could pull off this upset again this year, but they did lose a couple of their starters that were on that team last year as well. I think they have 2 starters who return from that team this year, so they do have some experience here. The Ivy was a little bit down this year versus what it was last year, but still, this Yale team, not a bad team. And KenPom has them, I think, somewhere in like the 60s ranking-wise, so definitely a team that could compete. And if you're looking just for them to cover the number, yeah, I wouldn't mind taking the points with Yale, because Texas A&M, they don't shoot well, and they play really, really ugly. And you'd have to look up their metrics, because I know there's a stat where teams that have like a really bad 3-point shooting percentage it's below, like, I don't know if it's 35% or maybe like somewhere in the lower 30s. Those teams, I think, had like never won a tournament game. And that might still actually hold, unless maybe Texas A&M maybe was the team that qualified for that and actually did win one game last year before they lost to Houston. I forget. I think they beat Nebraska. So I think Texas A&M last year might have been the first team with that bad a 3-point percentage to actually win that. Texas A&M does rebound. They're really physical. They get a lot of rebounds. They'll probably have a bit of a size advantage here against Yale, so that's a little bit of a hesitation maybe. But Texas A&M, again, they play slow. They play defense. Don't take a lot of threes. They're not a good shooting team. So some of their profile does look like they shouldn't be able to cover a big number like this. And Yale is going to be a team that will shoot from the outside more. So maybe a little bit of an upset profile there. Iowa State in this region, I think, is probably a bit undervalued because of the way that they finished the season. They just seem like they can't get healthy, man. They're a big favorite against Lipscomb here. I mean, that's not really an interesting matchup, in my opinion. But are you going to have to look at that matchup and see? Also, you got to look at where these games really are. Like, I might have to break them down on the day of more so. But this is supposed to be a quick reaction, man. But we'll see. I figured I would go for about an hour here, but we'll see. Anyway, Iowa State, expected them to be a 3 seed. They had a really, really good profile throughout most of the year where when when they had their full complement of players, they had only had one loss up until like the final game of the regular season. I think when they lost to BYU, and then they lost in the tournament. Obviously, I bet them, and they lost in the first round of the tournament, which was unexpected. But a lot of times when a team does that and they lose early in the tournament, they get all that time off and they get to kind of like right the ship, man. If you're Iowa State and you had a bad ending to the season, early exit from your tournament, and Iowa State was a team that had done really well in the Big 12 tournament in recent years. So they still have that really good coaching there, decent amount of experience. And you have to look and see if all their players are healthy. But if they are, this Iowa State team is not going to be easy to knock out of this tournament, man. So Iowa State, definitely a team that I think is being overlooked at this point because of the way they finished the season and because of all the injuries that they had during the season, where three of their like best players had been out at different points during the season. But when all those guys are there, even still now, I think they only have 3 losses with those guys there. So don't hate Iowa State at all. But I think this region still sets up pretty nicely. I think Auburn probably is going to be the team that gets through this region. And I see a lot of the analysts taking Michigan State to win this region to the point where I think they're going to be a little bit overvalued. And we know Tom Izzo, he gets his team battle tested, gets them ready for the tournament. That's for sure. But the Big Ten, they don't win it all, man. They haven't won it all in who knows how long. So Big Ten, I know you shouldn't just look at like a conference, like, you know, as a general statement like that and be like, this team isn't going to be able to do it. But I think Michigan State, when it comes down to it, it seems like the analysts are just hyping them up a little bit too much and undervaluing Auburn because Auburn lost 3 out of 4 to finish the season. And I know that doesn't look good. And I think teams that have lost 3 out of the last 4 games never have won the championship. So I don't know about picking Auburn to actually win the entire thing, but I do think they would be the team to come out of the South region, though, because I actually think they're being a little bit overlooked now because of those games. But I mean, dude, they lost a close game to Tennessee, who's really good in the tournament. They lost to Alabama to finish the season, which that was a game where Baker Mazzara, who's definitely an asshole, got thrown out of the game for Auburn. And they definitely could have won that game. They lost at a buzzer beater. And then the game before that, they lost at Texas A&M. And I had Texas A&M in that game. And I did lose on Auburn in the game against Alabama. But the Texas A&M game was a really bad spot for them because they had, I think, clinched the regular season title. And they had Alabama up next. So it was a sandwich spot. So I think Auburn is a little bit being overlooked here. Michigan State, yeah, they're definitely good. But I probably would bounce them at some point. And they're going to probably have to get through Iowa State here too, which maybe causes them a little bit more danger than maybe Michigan would, even though I did just talk about how Michigan does have the pedigree. Michigan does have kind of a dangerous path here, man, more minefields. And when you fill out a bracket, like I'll show you when I'll probably fill out a bracket, maybe like right before the tournament starts, maybe Wednesday night. I'll do it when we know who the playing teams which playing teams have gotten through and whatever. Michigan State, though, yeah. I mean, I think that, what was I going to say? Yeah, I think Auburn, like less of a minefield. When you fill out a bracket, you want to look backwards, man. So we'll wait until these numbers come up, but you got to see like, who is the public picking? It almost becomes like a DFS type of thing, daily fantasy, where you look at it in like terms of percentage ownership, and you need to kind of play game theory a little bit, where you want to look at what percentage ownership does a particular team have at a certain level of this tournament. And I think ESPN stupidly, unfortunately, maybe because they realized there was too much value in this, but it's really only for filling out brackets. So why would they care? It's not for betting purposes, really. It's only for bracket purposes. So I don't know why they got rid of the who picked whom, or you can see the percentage at every round, but Yahoo still does show you that information, I'm pretty sure. So you can like look at those. And I think on team rankings, Pool Genius, you have to pay for that, which I think I actually do. It's not that much money. I think they actually show you the numbers as well for those percentages. But that's what you want to look for. And you want to start backwards. Like you want to pick your champ first. And you want it to be based on the size of your pool, though. That's the thing. Like if your pool is small, you want to take like fewer risks than if your pool is like bigger. So it should be based on the size of your pool a little bit too. But I would say with your champion pick, you really can kind of narrow it down to a list of like 5 or 6 teams that really like legitimately can win. And then you just want to pick whichever one of those teams has the highest percentage chance to win, like based on the odds or whatever that's being picked at a lesser percentage than that. That's kind of what you want to look for. And maybe that's going to be Auburn. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, and then this Marquette, New Mexico game, it seems to me like New Mexico, I mean, they didn't look good in the first round of the tournament last year against Clemson, but Clemson's a slow down team. Clemson will grind you down. Marquette is not that. Marquette plays fast. New Mexico wants to play even faster, though, but I don't know, man. I don't know if I would trust New Mexico here. So I'm kind of leaning to Marquette as it stands right now. Marquette is, at least for picking who's going to win, Marquette is at least the favorite, and they are up from 3.5 to 4. New Mexico was like too trendy of a pick last year against Clemson early on. I think maybe they will be again. I mean, it's this whole thing about, the Mountain West doesn't win games in the tournament, which is true, except for San Diego State's huge run 2 years ago to the championship game. And then I think a couple of their teams won last year, but it is true that they tend to not do as well in the tournament facing these other teams here, teams from like better conferences. All right, and then we got the East, where, of course, Duke is in the East here. Duke gets a good grouping here where they get to play in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Duke is probably going to have Cooper Flagg back, by the way. So you got to look at these injury situations as well. It seems like he's going to be back. And if they're playing one of these 16 seeds, they can like kind of ease him back in. And then that's actually good for Duke because then that reverse injured player theory spot comes in a game against a really weak opponent where they should just win that game regardless. So that's going to help Duke. And I think if Houston is doing the same thing with Juwan Roberts, I think is his name, then they would be in a similar situation to that. Duke, I think they have kind of an easy path here as well, at least through the first few rounds. Like, I don't really see them losing in any of the first few rounds here. I mean, they got the winner of Mississippi State and Baylor, and I said SEC might be a little bit overrated here. I don't know if I really trust Mississippi State, man. And Baylor, they do still have that experience. I think they do have the coaching edge, even though Jans is all right for Mississippi State. Mississippi State lost in a game in 8-9 last year to Michigan State. I mean, Baylor could be getting overlooked a little bit too. They were one of those last teams in. I think we knew they were going to get in, but Baylor, I mean, they still have Scott Drew there. I mean, I think they got some of their players back, like Edgecombe, I think missed a bunch of the season. So they have some of these guys back. So kind of leaning to Baylor there. I mean, these are my early reactions. I don't know if by the time the game tips off, I'm going to still agree with myself. But Mississippi State's gone from a 1-point dog to a pick 'em with juice. So it looks like they're flipping to the favorite, but it could be maybe like guys playing games with the market early and trying to set it up. Who knows? And by the way, with the market, this is the March Madness tournament, man. So you do have to be aware of the fact that the public is going to be betting these games. There's more of a public influx in these games than there is in any other college basketball games. And it's not as big as the Super Bowl, I don't think, but it is up there amongst like some of the bigger publicly played like betting events. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the like favorites and the teams that the odds makers expect to get more public play are probably going to have their lines skewed a little bit more towards them. Oregon is playing Liberty. I think this is somewhere out west. I think, where's this game at? Let me see. This game, I think it favors Oregon. I think it's in Seattle. Yeah, at Climate Pledge Arena. Lame. So yeah, I mean, Liberty could be a trendy 12 as well. I don't know. I haven't really heard too many people talking about Liberty. It seems UC San Diego and McNeese seem to be the trendy picks there. I mean, Oregon's a 6.5-point favorite. I mean, I would, as far as the bracket is concerned, I think you got to just advance Oregon. I mean, they're playing basically right, like pretty close by to where they are. I mean, they're playing in Seattle. Liberty has to fly all the way out west for this, and it's a nighttime game. And you know, these East Coast teams having to play a late night West Coast game when they really haven't gone that far west all year, and their biological clock has to adjust to it. They're going to be playing really, really late at night based on their biological clock. For Oregon, probably more of their crowd's going to show up too because they're playing in Seattle. So I would not want to look to try to take Liberty here, really, especially not to win straight up in my bracket. These are my early feelings, but I don't think I'm going to change my opinion on that. Oregon up from 5.5 to 6.5 there. So probably looking at Oregon probably gets to advance there. And Arizona, huge favorite against Akron. I don't really see anything going on with that game. I think both teams kind of like to play up tempo too, and Arizona's just the better team. So I don't expect that to be anything good for Akron. And that game's out west too, although it's not as late as the Oregon Liberty game. But again, you got kind of an Eastern team going out west, and it's a better setup for Arizona, who is a Western team. So the committee knows what they're doing, man. They're rigging a lot of these matchups. Then you got BYU, VCU. This is an interesting one. This is out in Denver. And I would probably like VCU if it wasn't for the location of this, basically. BYU up from 2.5 to 2.5 with juice. Looks like some of the early money's coming in on BYU. VCU is a team that I was kind of had in my mind as, this could be a team that could make a little bit of a run out of an 11 seed. And they are a slow down team, and BYU does like to speed it up. And you want to look for, VCU does profile as one of those upset teams, man, because you want to look for slow teams that can kind of slow the pace down so the game like stays close and stays in hand. And you want those teams to be able to hit 3-pointers, and VCU definitely qualifies for both of those things. They can hit threes. BYU likes to speed the game up. Problem is, this game is in Denver, so it's in elevation. So VCU not used to having to play in elevation at all, man. And they had to play today, whereas BYU is going to have a little bit of an extra rest edge because they played only a couple of games into the they were hot to finish the season. They were like a hot commodity, but then they did lose to Houston, which I still think BYU is going to be a little bit trendy, maybe, but I just don't like how this sets up for VCU, man. Normally I would. If this game was in a different location, I might like VCU to actually pull off the upset. It would be a mild upset. BYU not a huge favorite here, but in this, I just don't see it happening really because VCU having to go out into Denver doesn't seem great to me. And BYU obviously is used to playing in elevation because that's really what leads to their like home advantage all the time, man. So I don't love it. Wisconsin against Montana. I mean, yeah, Montana playing also in Denver. They're playing kind of in their time zone. Wisconsin not really that used to going out west there like that, but it's an afternoon game. Wisconsin's a huge favorite. I mean, the Big Sky, not a very good conference. I know Wisconsin is going to be at a rest disadvantage, though, because they played up through today into the Big Ten tournament. So they were one of the last teams to finish playing. But I don't know that I would want to lay the points with Wisconsin, but they are a faster tempo team this year. And they shot really, really badly in that game against Michigan today, like a 20%. I think they were like 20% from the field in this game, man, 20-something percent. So I think they are going to bounce back from that. I would not expect Montana to be able to get that done there. And then this is one of those SEC matchups where I kind of think that the SEC team is going to get bounced here. St. Mary's 4.5-point favorite here against Vandy. I don't know where this game is at. Where is this game being played? It's being played in Cleveland, Ohio. So, I mean, closer to Vandy, but still St. Mary's. It's not really that early of a game. It's 3:15 p.m., so it's going to be like playing a noon game. So I don't think it's going to throw St. Mary's off that much. If it's like playing a noon game for them in Pacific Coast time. The reason for looking at St. Mary's here is that they slow the game down. They play ugly, slow down basketball, and Vandy wants to try to go up tempo and speed it up. And in these first round games, you want to look for more often than not, you want to look for teams that slow the pace down, although it is a little bit tougher when they're laying points because you want those slow down teams to be like getting points because it kind of it makes it like a lower scoring game. So the points are worth more, but I like St. Mary's to get that one done there. Who we got in the chat? Nate, what's up, man? Dick Vitale, Toad Vitale, not my name. I told you I posted my name in one of the comments on one of Wager Talks videos there. It's similar to I don't know if I should give that much away. What should I think it means like a hungry dog or something. So maybe that's some information that will let you know what my family Italian name is. Even though if you knew what the name was, you still wouldn't be able to find me because it's on my mom's side. So the names have all changed. Charles, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out. Dirty Sock, you as well. What's up, man? Thanks for hanging out. And then Alabama. I mean, we're going to see Alabama. This is interesting because I think Alabama, did they play St. Mary's in the tournament last year? No, because I think St. Mary's lost to Grand Canyon maybe, and then Alabama played Grand Canyon. Is that right? Alabama almost had a matchup with St. Mary's, which that's going to be a massive contrast in styles if that happens. Man, Alabama plays unbelievably fast, one of the fastest in the country, and St. Mary's is one of the slowest. That could actually be bad for Alabama, though, because, Alabama, obviously, I expect them to beat Robert Morris. But then if Alabama if they wind up having to face St. Mary's in a quick turnaround time in a second game, St. Mary's could ugly that game up and put a scare into Alabama, man, if not potentially even win that game. So I actually would be a little bit worried about Alabama there, just the way this kind of sets up here. So this region, it looks like it sets up for Duke, unfortunately, because I hate Duke, but I just don't see Duke really getting that much competition here. And I think the committee wants it that way, man. Even though the ACC was down this year, Duke probably gets out of this region, man, unfortunately, because I just don't really see it. I mean, Wisconsin might be the team that kind of gets through this part of the bracket, but I mean, well, Wisconsin having to play BYU and Denver doesn't look that easy either. If BYU gets by VCU, that could be difficult for Wisconsin, man. I think Wisconsin would much rather have VCU, although VCU is going to like slow the game down and muck it up. But VCU and Wisconsin both shoot threes, and Wisconsin is just a better shooting team. I think the VCU is. BYU is a really good offensive team, and playing in elevation, that might like throw Wisconsin off a little bit. And Wisconsin's not that slow down style team anymore. So again, yeah, to me, I don't really see Duke being threatened that much in this region, man. Unfortunately, they're half of the region. If we're looking at, I mean, Arizona, maybe. Arizona's pretty good. They do like to speed up the game a bit, but I just don't see it. I mean, Duke, they slow the game down, which is pretty good in a tournament environment. If they do wind up against Alabama, I think that's bad for Alabama as well. The slowdown team usually kind of has the advantage once it gets to that. So, unfortunately, yeah, that's what the ballot said. That's not my my Italian name either, though. Duke Lacrosse, yeah, they're all innocent, man. I mean, I'm not even joking. They're innocent. So, I mean, those are my thoughts on this East region here. And then we got the, how far am I into this video? Because I just kind of wanted to preview this, but I just don't stop talking. We're only, half an hour. All right, we'll get this done. The Midwest, Houston is just ridiculous. 28.5-point favorite. Them and Florida are the biggest favorites that are listed right now. Though we know Duke, once we figure out who their opponent is, and Auburn, once we figure out who their opponent is, they're going to be massive, like 20-something point favorites as well, if not 30. So all the ones, we should not get a 16-1 upset, man. I don't know if that really needs to be said, but Houston, I think they actually got really, really screwed here, man, even though they are playing in the Midwest. So they do have the advantage that they're playing in Wichita. So at least there's that. So they're not that far from their home, but they get absolutely screwed. And I think the committee knows this, even though Houston is a big boy now. They're in the Big 12. The committee seems like they always try to screw Houston over. And like I said, when I was talking about Duke, I think Houston will have Juwan Roberts back, and it sounds like he might play in this game. And if I was them, if I was Kelvin Sampson, I would play him in this game, like I said, because you want to get that reverse injured player theory out of the way in that game against a really easy opponent. You know, just get him used to playing again, get that game out of the way. Maybe you don't play as well, you don't have that much chemistry, but you should be able to beat SIU Edwardsville anyway. Even though they're a first-time team in the tournament, man. So they're not used to this. They'll be happy to be there, but obviously Houston should win. But then the problem for Houston is Gonzaga. And if you follow me on Twitter, I said Gonzaga was going to be the biggest 8-9 favorite in history. And I think maybe I got that wrong because I didn't know which one of their opponents they were going to get. They're a 6.5-point favorite here, which is still pretty big for an 8-9 matchup. Let me see. They're up from 6.5 to 6.5 with juice. I think Gonzaga is going to win this game against Georgia. So another SEC team that I don't love. Gonzaga, they're like the most underrated team in college basketball, man. And maybe the most underrated like 8 seed that I've ever seen, except for maybe Kentucky. There was one year where Kentucky was an 8 seed and Wichita was the 1 seed in the region. And Wichita was a 1-loss team, but Wichita was in I think the Missouri Valley back then. So they were in whatever bad conference they were in. They were overrated, and Kentucky, I think, was underseeded because they had been dealing with injuries or something. This was John Calipari, I think, was the Kentucky coach. And Kentucky, wouldn't you know it, they won as the 8 seed over that 1 seed, Wichita. And I think Kentucky went on a run in that tournament. I'm not saying that's going to happen here with Gonzaga, but I think Gonzaga should beat Georgia. Gonzaga, as I was about to say, they're severely underrated, man. They're an 8 seed because they did lose a bunch of games here. They lost some games to some good teams in the out-of-conference play. They still played a strong out-of-conference schedule because they usually do. But then again, yeah, they haven't faced great competition in the West Coast Conference, although the West Coast Conference does have, Oregon State in it now, Washington State. St. Mary's is definitely a really good team. San Francisco, not really that bad. Santa Clara is decent. So, I mean, they did face okay competition. I mean, obviously nowhere as good as the SEC, but Gonzaga, I mean, like I said, they're the best team in the West Coast Conference, even though their record wouldn't really show it. But the hilarious thing is they're an 8 seed, and Ken Pom has them as the 9th best team in the entire country. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. And they just, like, analytically, they just have the same analytics that they always do as this Gonzaga team. They're just a very, very good offensive team. They play fast, and their defense is a bit questionable. That's always what they do. I don't think there's that much of a difference between this Gonzaga team and other similar Gonzaga teams. So they should win against Georgia. And then, I mean, I think they could give Houston an issue in that next game. So Houston really does get kind of screwed here. I would still expect Houston to win that game because it is a quick turnaround time. Houston is really the slow down, like just grinding team. And Houston this year actually can score better than in years past. That's kind of been their bugaboo, really, is that they've played really good defense, really slow down basketball all these years under Sampson, but they just haven't been a good offensive team, and they've like just fizzled out offensively at somewhere in the tournament. But they can hit threes at a decent percentage this year, even though they don't take that many of them. They can score, and they cause turnovers, and they score in transition, man. And they can definitely score. They shoot at a high percentage this year, at the highest in the Kelvin Sampson era, I think. So this still is probably the most dangerous Houston team in that era to really, really make it far here. And, I mean, they just won the Big 12 tournament, and I talked about how Houston has lost in their conference tournament under Sampson every other year. They just didn't give a shit about the final. And this year, I'm not even sure that they necessarily did, and they still won it against a decent Arizona team, and an Arizona team that likes to speed it up. And that's what Gonzaga likes to do. Gonzaga, I mean, they're going to have a little bit more rest because they won the West Coast Conference a few days ago. Houston didn't play today, at least, though. They won their conference tournament yesterday. So, I mean, I think it'll be a tough game for Houston. Gonzaga is going to try to speed the game up. I think the slow pace of Houston will win out, but Houston will be a favorite, not by a whole lot in that game if that's the matchup, and I don't know if Houston's even really going to cover. I think they could get a scare in that game. Houston also gets screwed in the fact that Clemson is in their region. I think McNeese is going to be another trendy pick. They were a trendy pick last year. I mean, it's McNeese is Will Wade, man. I mean, he has tournament experience. He was LSU's coach for a while, and then they fired him because of recruiting violations. He got wiretapped by the feds, and they fired him because he was on a phone call offering money to a recruit, which, by the way, I think now you can just do that because of the NIL and whatever. Players can get paid now. So he got fired for something that's no longer even disallowed, I think. And I think the quote that they had of him on that phone call was like, I forget exactly what it was, but it was like him offering whatever player it was a huge ass contract or something like that. So it's all just kind of hilarious, really. $120 thanks to that. Oh, thank you. Oh, the Panthers lost. I didn't have any feel for that game at all. What did I give you for what did I give you that was good this morning, man? I mean, all my actual bets lost, so I had a really bad day. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, BC, yeah, they got upset in college. I don't even know what's going on, man. Are we talking about the Bean Pot, or are we talking about the Hockey East? I haven't been following it at all. I know the Hockey East was being played at the Garden, the Titty Garden, the TD Garden. I wasn't paying any attention to it, though, because I'm like, well, I'm not going to go to that because March Madness is going on. I don't care that much about college hockey. I'm just wearing the BC hat for no real reason other than it's the local college hat that I have here on hand. And their basketball team is great, man. What are you talking about? I used to like their basketball team back in the day, man. Clemson and McNeese. So McNeese has Will Wade. Yeah, I mean, it's just hilarious. All these recruiting violations, and now it's just stuff that's just allowed, whatever. But he's really turned this McNeese program into something solid. They played a more difficult schedule this year out of conference as well. Of course, their conference sucks, so they played a really easy conference schedule. So they have not been tested in quite a while, which is kind of the I think that would kind of be the issue with like Gonzaga and teams like that as well. But Gonzaga, I mean, they're like they're almost a blue blood at this point. I mean, they're kind of used to this. They got Mark Few there. I mean, they're used to being in tournaments like this. Georgia is actually not. So Gonzaga has an experience edge there over Georgia too, by the way, because Georgia had a good season this year from out of nowhere, and they're kind of just new to this. So another reason to lean Gonzaga in that game. Clemson and McNeese, like I said, McNeese, they were a real trendy pick last year, and Gonzaga absolutely wrecked them in the first round because McNeese was going up against a Gonzaga team that had experience, and Gonzaga annihilated them. McNeese was really trendy. They seem to be trendy again. It might be easier for them to cover this number because Clemson likes to play slow. Clemson up from 6.5 to 7.5, though, so some money coming in on Clemson. I mean, I would probably advance Clemson in my bracket, though. Clemson profiles is a pretty difficult out here, and they're a very balanced team, even though the ACC isn't good this year. Clemson, I think, is the second best team in the ACC, even though I know they lost to Louisville twice. I think Clemson is the better of those two teams still. I think they should get by McNeese, and the winner of Purdue and High Point, Clemson might be able to get by them too. Clemson does have some experience now, man. They made that nice run last year, and people might remember that or they might not. I don't know, but they bounced Arizona, which sucked because Arizona was my bracket champion last year. I was trying to go against the grain a little bit, even though I know the thing about all the teams west of the Mississippi haven't won the tournament in 20-something years. I know, whatever. Shouldn't have picked Arizona. Oh, well. Clemson slowed them down and beat them last year. McNeese likes to play slow as well, though, so it's a bit of a better matchup for McNeese in that respect, that it's two slow-down teams, but Clemson is just the better overall team. So even though Gonzaga was able to speed McNeese up and just run them out of the building last year, Clemson won't do that, but I still expect them to win. Whether or not they cover, kind of a different story if it's kind of that slow, ugly style of game. But Clemson, they profile really well, balanced, good offense and good defense, and I think they actually meet the KenPom metrics as far as like the champion metrics over the last several years on KenPom. They've all been like, I think top 25 in KenPom offensively and like top 30 something defensively. And Clemson is one of the teams that does meet those criteria. Purdue, everybody's going to be low on Purdue. Maybe they'll get by this High Point team. And High Point, they're another team that's new to the tournament. They've never been to the tournament before. So, I mean, maybe they'll be high just to be here and they'll be excited to play Purdue. So they might be excited for that reason. They also don't really have the experience. Purdue obviously has experience with, they have a couple of guys on their team that obviously were in the championship game last year. They still have Matt Painter there as the coach. Obviously, they don't have Zach Edey anymore, so they do suffer on the interior. They still shoot pretty efficiently. They have good guard play still with Braden Smith there and whoever else they got there, but not the same Purdue team as last year. They're an 8.5-point favorite against High Point. Not a huge favorite, actually down from 9 to 8 with juice now, so some money may be fading them there. Probably they get through this game. I would probably advance them in my bracket and probably, I mean, I shouldn't, like I said, you want to look backwards in the bracket, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud about maybe like ideas of how I'm going to fill out my bracket. Probably Purdue, probably Clemson, I mean, would probably be the team to get through this, this grouping here. I don't know where this is being played, though. It's in Providence, Rhode Island, so it's not that much of an edge really to any of these teams necessarily. And then we got Illinois, who is going to face the winner of this other play-in game, which I didn't talk about yet, Texas and Xavier. And I think this might be another game where Texas, people are going to be saying Texas shouldn't be in. Texas definitely faced a more difficult schedule than Xavier. Xavier made a nice late run to get themselves in the tournament. Almost beat Marquette in the Big East tournament, but Texas definitely played a more difficult schedule, man. I don't think it's not even that close. I think based on the metrics, Texas might come out a little bit better, although Xavier is actually the favorite in this game. Actually up from 1 to 2.5, so a lot of money coming in on Xavier. I don't know if I necessarily understand that. I mean, they do have Zach Fremantle. Is that his name? He's really the best player that Xavier has, and he does have tournament experience because they were in the tournament a couple of years ago, and I think they made the Sweet 16. They weren't in the tournament last year, but they do have a little bit of experience. But Texas does have experience as well. My initial read on this was to kind of lean Texas's way just because it's one of those teams that's going to be shit on as they shouldn't be here, but I don't know. We'll see. And then whether or not the winner of that can beat Illinois, I mean, I don't know, because Illinois, again, they're like I talked about with UNC, might be at a little bit of a disadvantage because they don't know who they're going to be playing in that next game yet. I I don't even know which one of these teams might be a better matchup for Illinois, because Illinois likes to play fast, and I think neither of these teams really play that fast. I would have to look at Xavier. I try to get the pacing in my head and memorize all this. I don't really remember. I'd have to look at Ken Bum again. Illinois, kind of surprised to see them as a 6 seed, the way they really like faltered down the stretch. But in a way, I do think Illinois is better than they look, and they have experience. I mean, they were in the Elite Eight last year. I was at that game, or those 2 games in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. Brad Underwood is there. I mean, they still have that experience. They have a different team this year. Some of their guys are gone, like Coleman, whatever the hell his name is on Kansas State. Dane Danger is on Memphis now. So whatever, fun name, Dane Danger. Got to see him in person. He's fun to watch just because he's a huge guy, and it looks like he shouldn't even be able to run up and down the court the way that he does. It's kind of hilarious to watch him. Illinois doesn't have those guys anymore. Illinois, I think they're maybe a little bit underrated right now, and they just got massacred in the Big Ten tournament. A lot of times, like I say, when you see teams that get annihilated like early in their tournament, a lot of times they use that extra time off to refocus and play a much better game to start the tournament. So sometimes those teams are not teams that you want to go against, whereas you do sometimes want to go against teams that really exert themselves and make like a deep run. If they play like a bunch of games in their conference tournament, maybe they're a team that was already going to get in and they, for some reason, just go all out and win their tournament. You might see that, although, like I said, I'm not going to be jumping out of my seat to fade Houston. I'm not going to play any of these 116 games, man. And once Houston gets that game out of the way, that kind of type of spot gets thrown out the window. And then Kentucky and Troy. Kentucky's a double-digit favorite here. Kentucky might get Lamont Butler back. Kentucky's been dealing with a lot of injuries this year, man. Maybe he is back, or maybe he got hurt again. He came back. I think he got hurt again, but I think it seems like he's going to play in the tournament. They're not going to have Jackson Robinson, who is one of their better players. He's not going to be back. So Kentucky does have kind of this injury carousel going on, but I think they should be able to beat Troy. I mean, Kentucky's a fast-paced team. Troy is a slow-paced team, but Troy doesn't shoot well. I just don't think Troy, they're not like Oakland last year, where Oakland could just unleash their threes with a Golke there. I don't see Troy being able to do that. Kentucky should be able to get that done. Kentucky, a big double-digit favorite, though, although I know we always see upsets. They're down from 11 to 10.5. I mean, maybe if Troy tries to slow it down and grind them down a little bit, but I just don't really see that happening. This game's in Milwaukee, so it's not really an advantage to either teams. Both teams are from the South. And then we got UCLA, Utah State. I expect UCLA to get through that one. UCLA is the favorite there. Let me see. UCLA up down actually from 4.5 to 4.5 with reduced juice, but I just don't like Utah State. And then I know they won a game last year in the tournament, but I don't love them. They have a new coach this year who came over from Youngstown State, and I know he turned that program into a decent program there, but he doesn't have NCAA tournament experience. Of course, UCLA does with Mick Crone, and as much as he shits on his own players all the time, I just think UCLA is the better team. I think the matchup is better for them. UCLA is a slow-paced team, good defense. Utah State doesn't play good defense, and they try to run up-tempo. So I think UCLA, being the better team, probably is able to slow the pace down and get that win there. Also, the game is in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm not going to make the glory hole joke again, but Lexington, Kentucky. And I think that actually might help UCLA a little bit, even though they're having to go to the East Coast, but it's a night, or not East Coast, Eastern time zone, but it's a night game, so that probably won't throw UCLA that far off as far as the time zone shift. But UCLA has played in the Eastern time zone already because of the Big Ten conference realignment. UCLA has had to do this, and they've had to play like in Indiana, and they actually won that game. I played on UCLA in that one because I think it was Indiana coming off their upset of Michigan State, so I faded Indiana in that game. But UCLA, I think they have a little bit of an advantage because they're used to playing in this area of the country, whereas I don't think Utah State is, because they're in the Mountain West and they just play all their games out west. So I think UCLA makes sense there. It's the Northeastern tourney, so that's the Northeastern Conference. I don't know what the conferences even are in hockey, man. It's a Kentucky Fried matchup. Yeah, it is. And then Tennessee against Wofford. I mean, Wofford is a team that can hit threes. So Tennessee does play a slow-down style, so maybe there is a little bit of upset potential there, but Tennessee, an 18.5-point favorite. I mean, I still don't really see it. They might be the smallest favorite, actually tied with St. John's maybe as far as these number 2 seeds. Actually, Michigan State, same as well. Michigan State against Bryant. I mean, Bryant isn't that bad a team, but again, I mean, it is still a pretty big mismatch. Tennessee, though, they play very, very slow. The slowest out of any of these teams. They play good defense, slow it down. If Wofford is like hitting some threes, it could get a little bit interesting. Could be one of those games that's like interesting early on, but then Wofford just kind of gets too physically punished by Tennessee's defense and they wind up losing the game. And then Tennessee would potentially get UCLA in a very slow paced matchup between those two teams. I mean, Tennessee and Kentucky would be, if it gets to Tennessee, Kentucky, that would be a major contrast in styles. Kentucky playing fast, Tennessee playing slow. I could see Tennessee getting through a decent amount of this. I don't think I would want to take them that far, though. I mean, this is a region that's really kind of a gauntlet, really, man. I mean, a lot of decent teams in this conference, in this region. I don't know which team I would actually want to take to get out of this thing, man. And maybe it would still be Houston. I know I'm going with all the 1 seeds here. That Gonzaga matchup would be difficult for them. Clemson, not easy either. I mean, we could see some like surprise team come out of this region, really. In Tennessee, I don't want to take Rick Barnes to get to the Final Four. I mean, I know that's the whole thing. Through all his years, like 2 decades now of coaching at Texas and Tennessee, being in the tournament this many times, he's never made the Final Four. He got really close last year. They were in the Elite Eight, I think, against Purdue last year and lost a close game to Purdue. Still hasn't happened, though. So, I mean, I would not want to really buck that trend there. So even though Houston's got Gonzaga there, and Clemson is a dangerous matchup, maybe Houston is still the team that gets out of this region. I mean, they've just been winning so many games on the road. They're really good. They're really balanced. They meet the KenPom metrics as far as like really balanced offensive and defensive team, although they lean defense still more than offense. And I think the teams that win usually lean slightly more offensively than defensively. Although I don't know. Although they do tend to be slower teams, I think, more often than not, like UConn was the last couple of years and still is. And speaking of UConn, where are they at? Are they in this last region that I haven't talked about? Yeah, they are. So Florida is in this region in the West against Norfolk State. I mean, okay. Yeah. I mean, Florida, yeah, should get by that. UConn should be able to beat Oklahoma. I think it's another SEC team that might get bounced in the first round. UConn is a favorite. Oklahoma, I mean, they kind of came from out of nowhere this year. They played a really good out-of-conference schedule, and I know UConn is not in their conference, but Oklahoma didn't do that well in the SEC. UConn is a pretty formidable opponent with pedigree, man. I mean, this is a team that won the last 2 championships. They still have Dan Hurley there, even though he's kind of a psychopath, and I don't like him. This UConn team, they could potentially beat some of the better teams in college basketball, man. They're up from 4 to 4.5 here, so probably going to advance UConn in my bracket out of that. I don't know if I'll bet them, but I think they have the experience edge. Oklahoma really has not been impressive since that out-of-conference slate that they had where I don't think they faced really that difficult an out-of-conference schedule either. UConn, I think, actually had a more difficult out-of-conference schedule and suffered some losses there. They started playing better. I mean, they made a decent run in the Big East, excuse me. By the way, I forgot to congratulate St. John's when I mentioned all the conference winners. Congratulations to St. John's for winning the Big East. They're going to be in this region as well. UConn should get by. I mean, UConn also plays slow, and I think Oklahoma likes to play faster, so that's a bad matchup for Oklahoma as well. If they're facing a UConn team, it's a better team. UConn, they don't have like all their players from last year, obviously. I know, what was the big guy's name again? I saw him play live, and I wasn't that impressed by him. Like, he doesn't handle the ball well. Although, you don't need a big guy to handle the ball. He's in the NBA now. I can't even remember the guy's name. Something with a C. I don't remember, but he's gone. But UConn does still have like Caravan and a couple other of those guys. I think they have a couple of players who are on those championship teams. So they still have a little bit of pedigree there. They have the same coach, obviously. Way more experience than this Oklahoma team. I think UConn gets through that. And then they may be able to play a close game against Florida, man. Florida meets those KenPom metrics as far as like being really balanced, really good on both offense and defense. But I don't know if I trust Florida because they came from out of nowhere. And there's a historical trend where teams that are not in like the top 10, I think, in the preseason polls have only won the tournament 3 times in the last like few decades or something. And I think maybe all of them were UConn. At least one of them was at UConn like 7 seed when they made that run in like 2014 or whatever. One of them was UConn 2 years ago when they were a 4 seed, I think, and won the whole thing. And then I don't remember who the other one was, but the history is definitely against this. And then only one team ranked outside of the top 20 in the preseason polls has ever won the championship, and that was UConn 2 years ago. They were unranked, I think, in the preseason polls because I think they hadn't even made the tournament the year before that. Florida was 21st, I think, in the preseason polls this year. So, but Florida, I mean, they have a little bit of experience. They were in the tournament last year, but they were without Hangloten, like I said, however you pronounce his name, Hangloten. Hand glutton. He likes to eat people's hands or eat with his hands. I have no idea. Cannibal glutton. He's their big man. He is back. So Florida, I mean, they definitely have a stacked lineup, man. And they just won the SEC championship. But I think that's going to overhype them a little bit, man. Everybody's going to be like, oh, the SEC, they're the best, conference in basketball, which I don't disagree with that. They are. And Florida won it, man. So this Florida team, they're going to be so good. But again, they ran through that absolute gauntlet, man. I mean, obviously, I don't expect them to lose to Norfolk State, but they run into a slowdown team like UConn, who has a lot of pedigree. Could get a little bit dicey for Florida. I mean, I wouldn't really expect them to lose that game. There's the potential there, but if they get through that, I think maybe they're going to be able to get like on a run if they get through UConn, because I'm not sure that I love these 4 and 5 teams here, man. I actually hate Memphis. Which I'm going to talk about this in a sec. What? Chlamydiation Jones? What are you talking about? I don't even know who we're talking about. Memphis, though, they might be one of the most overseeded teams in the entire tournament, man. I mean, I think KenPom has them outside of the top 50 in his rankings, and the committee has them as the 20th team and has seeded them as a 5. And what do we have here? We have a 12 seed who is favored over the 5 seed. Colorado State is a 2.5 point favorite, down a little bit with reduced juice. This is the first one that I'm looking to actually bet. I don't know if it's going to come down from the 2.5. We could take Colorado State money line. I like Colorado State here, man. I really do not like Memphis at all. They're coming out of a really weak conference, and I know they didn't play well in their conference tournament. They almost lost multiple times to Wichita State and Tulane, so they did get a scare, but then they won against UAB, I think by double digits, although that game was closer until Memphis made a late run to make that win look better than it was too in the championship game today. This Memphis team, they've not faced a strong schedule. They're not very good, and they turn the ball over a ton, whereas I think Colorado State is much better at holding on to the ball. I think this is a bad matchup for Memphis. And Colorado State likes to play slower than Memphis does, and they can still shoot. I would say that kind of has the makings of maybe a team that can upset you, but Colorado State's the favorite. Although if Memphis loses, they will be upset. But Memphis, they do not have a good track record in this tournament either, man. I don't even remember. Were they even in the tournament last year? Maybe they were, and I don't even remember who they played or what happened in that game. Maybe they weren't even in it. The year before that, I remember FAU beat them in a really close game that went to the wire. I remember that because I had FAU, I think, on the money line in that game, maybe, and FAU won that game. So I was obviously happy about that. And I had FAU winning that game in my bracket, but of course, I had them losing to Purdue in my bracket, which who really didn't? So what can you do about that? Although I did not have Purdue going that far that year in that bracket that year. I had them, I think, losing to Tennessee in the next round, and Tennessee wound up losing to FAU in a game that Tennessee blew the game. So that was great. I thought it set up really nicely for me to get Tennessee advancing in my bracket there, but that's my bracket autism again, remembering past brackets. Anyway, I like Colorado State here, and I know they ran through the Mountain West, but they're one of those teams where when you're a team that wasn't expected to get into the tournament at all and you steal a bid, those teams actually do pretty well in the tournament, and they are kind of like free rolling because they didn't even expect to be here. So it's like, wow, hell yeah, we're actually here. So that's good for Colorado State. I like that. This game is in Seattle, Washington, I'm pretty sure too. So Memphis, even though it's not a late night game, I would like it more if it was a late night game. Because Memphis having to go out to a Pacific Coast time zone and play a late night game would fuck with their biological clock, but still they have to go out west. I'm pretty sure this is Seattle. Yeah, it is. So I think it's a little bit of a better geographic location for a Mountain West team because those Mountain West teams play kind of in that general area. So that's a little bit better for Colorado State as well. And even though, as I was saying, Colorado State ran through their conference, they had to do it to get in, but also they finished it last night and they had kind of an easy win in some of those games. Easy win over, I think, Utah State and Boise State didn't really put up much of a fight against Colorado State. So it's not like they're putting in like max effort and going to the wire in every one of these games. That wasn't the case. And Memphis was actually going to the wire in their games and had to finish today. So there's no rest advantage for Memphis here. Colorado State finished their tournament in more easy fashion before Memphis finished theirs, even though I know Colorado State had to play 3 games. And I think Memphis also played 3 games. So there's no advantage there either. So yeah, I like Colorado State in that game quite a bit, man. And they have the coaching edge. Memphis, Penny Hardaway, I mean, Memphis turns the ball over unbelievably. They have no discipline. They show no signs of cleaning that up. And I know Memphis, I think, was without their point guard. So he might return. But then if he returns, that's going to be a reverse injured player theory spot where you get your point guard back and you got to get used to playing with him again. So there's nothing that I like about Memphis in this matchup, man. And of course, when you have the underseeded team as a favorite, that's a red flag, man, where you really want to look to that team. You don't see that very often, except in like 8-9 matchups. Of course, you see it. You'll see the 9 seed being favored fairly often against the 8. Not by a whole lot, but the 9 seeds have actually won over the last like several tournaments. The 9 seeds have won like 60% of the time or something. I don't know if that's going to happen here because I mentioned I liked a lot of the 8s this time. So it might not happen this time. I like probably 3 of the 4 8s, but whatever. When you see a 12 favorite over a 5, though, that doesn't happen very often. Even the 11-6 doesn't happen that often, even though the 11s have done pretty well against the 6s. A 12 seed, the last time I remember 12 seeds being favored over the 5, I remember they were both against Vandy, I'm pretty sure, in a couple of the tournaments way back, like probably about a decade ago. And I know I picked both of those 12 seeds and got them both right in my brackets. It was one was Murray State with John Morant, where I think that was I'm pretty sure it was against Vandy, and they were like a 1 or 2 point favorite, I'm pretty sure, and they got it done. And then the other one was Richmond against Vandy, and Richmond got it done as a 12 seed. I forget which year. I think Richmond was like a 1 point favorite. So again, we have another situation here where Colorado State 2.5 point favorite. If it comes down a little bit or whatever, this is probably going to be one that I am going to bet Colorado State money line, and I may bet North Carolina as well, like I said. Those are the 2 that I'm really eyeing right now. And then Maryland Grand Canyon, I don't know if this sets up that well for Maryland here, man. Maryland is definitely hyped. A lot of people talking about Maryland. Maryland down from 11.5 to 10.5, so money coming in, taking the double digits with Grand Canyon. Maryland's definitely hyped, but they came from out of nowhere, man. They're young. They don't have a lot of experience, and this is one of those matchups where you have the underdog being experienced. I'm not saying Grand Canyon will definitely pull off the upset. Like, I probably wouldn't really pick them to win straight up in my bracket, but Grand Canyon has the experience, man, and they have Bryce Drew, I believe, is their coach. So he's Scott Drew's brother there, Baylor's coach. Bryce Drew, known player back in the day, made that buzzer beater 3 or whatever, playing for Valpo back in the day, who never should have changed their team name, by the way. So Grand Canyon, they have experience, man. I think this is the 3rd straight year they've been in the tournament, and they have some guys still there from those teams. They have the same coach. So this is an experienced team with some pedigree here. And this game is being played, like I said, this whole grouping is in Seattle. So that helps Grand Canyon as well because they're from Arizona. So that's a much better location for them than it is for Maryland, having to travel out to the West Coast. I thought this game was a really late night game, but it isn't. It's 4:35 p.m. Eastern. So that's a little bit better for Maryland, I guess. So I thought they were going to be really like fucked biological clock-wise, having to go out into Seattle and play a really late night game. That's not the case. But even so, Maryland, again, they've been really, really hyped. They look pretty good in the Big Ten tournament, going out in the semifinals in a close game against Michigan. Everybody's been hyping this Maryland team. Yeah, they have a really good starting 5, but I think they do lack a little bit of depth and they do lack experience, and Grand Canyon does not lack experience. Grand Canyon, by the way, I think one of their best players was like being rested or hurt or something. There were issues with his academic eligibility or something. One of their best players, I forget his name, and he missed like a huge chunk of the season, which I think kind of affected Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon was supposed to be really, really good this year, like in the preseason rankings or whatever, and they kind of fell off. Didn't really do that well in the out of conference schedule. They did turn it on in the WAC, and they did well in the WAC. That's WAC. I think they lost like maybe 2 or 3 games, but they won the WAC tournament. They were the best team in the WAC. I think that player that was out with those eligibility issues is back. So I would look to take the points with Grand Canyon there. I'm probably not going to play it. And then I do like Drake plus the points too, even though this is a decent sized spread for a 6-11 matchup with Missouri being a big favorite. But I kind of like Drake here. Missouri is a 6-point favorite. Drake is a slowdown team. Missouri likes to play fast, so it's a bad pacing matchup for Missouri here. Drake has been in the tournament 3 straight years, although I know they lost DeVries and DeVries. They lost the coach and the player, the father and the son, so they're not there. But this Drake team has, not only have they not like suffered any sort of like hiccup after those guys left, they may have even gotten better with McCollum there as a new coach, and he has an excellent track record in Division II, but I know he's not experienced in the NCAA tournaments. That's kind of the drawback here, but some of these Drake players are, I think, because I think they still have some of their players from those previous tournament teams, and I know they lost both games. Drake was a pretty trendy upset pick a couple of those times, and I think they were actually maybe they were either a favorite, or I don't think they were a favorite, but I think they were like a 2-point dog against Miami. That was one of those 12-5 matchups that was close, but I don't think they were actually a favorite as a 12, but I think they were only like a 2-point dog 2 years ago against Miami, and I thought they might be able to get that done, but I think they were a little bit too trendy. Last year they were trending. This year they might not be as trendy, man. This Missouri team, the public likes offense, man, and they don't like teams that play like Drake, even though they might look at Drake's 30-3 record and be like, oh, that does look pretty. I have to take the points here. But I would take the points or not play this game because Drake slows it way, way, way down, which can frustrate Missouri. And Missouri is the team, I think, with still less experience here with Gates, I think, is their coach. They've come from out of nowhere this year, man. They were not supposed to do really anything this year, and they've far exceeded expectations this year. And I think they're a bit overrated because they're more of an offensive team, and that's what the public tends to like. Although Drake, even though they're a slow-down team, they still shoot pretty well. So I kind of like Drake in that one. I don't think I would advance them in my bracket just because they're a big enough underdog that I don't think I would really want to do that, especially in a smaller pool. I don't usually pick a whole ton of upsets, but we will see. And the Texas Tech, very, very dangerous Texas Tech team. I think they should get by UNC Wilmington. What was the name before? What do you mean? Valpo? They were the Crusaders. No, I've never been to the Final Four or a championship. If I went to the Final Four, I would go to the championship. I just get like the bundle because they're always in the same location. I went to the East Regionals last year, and then the only other time I think I went to tournament games was when I was in college. There were some of the opening round games were being played in Worcester at the DCU Center or whatever the hell it was called back then, and I got to see that Vermont-Syracuse upset, and everybody was rooting for Vermont pretty much, even though Syracuse travels okay to Worcester, but still a lot of people were rooting for that upset, man, for Vermont, because Vermont traveled decently to Worcester as well. And it was that one with TJ Sorrentino hitting like threes. I think Gus Johnson was the announcer there. From the parking lot, Sorrentino, where he was just hitting ridiculous threes to pull off that upset in overtime. And I was even more happy about it because I think I had Vermont in my bracket that year as well. So I really enjoyed that. So that was, I don't know, one of the years I was in college. I got to go to the game because I was in the men's glee club at my college as a gay man, obviously, and a singer. I was in the glee club and we were doing some fundraising thing. I forget exactly what it was, but we were working the concession stands at that thing. And like once the concession stands closed and whatever, like during like the later portions of the game, whatever, you can just kind of hang out like in the like aisles there and kind of just watch the game live. So that's I was at those games. It was fun. Skip Grand Canyon. Yeah, it's the largest gash. No, I kind of like taking the points with Grand Canyon there. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it, but hell yeah. And then Kansas, Arkansas. Kansas against Kansas, the retarded version of Kansas. Bill Self and John Calipari, man. I mean, you know, the committee loves this matchup. And this, where are these games being played? They're somewhere out east, probably, because St. John's is in this group. It's in Providence, Rhode Island. So St. John's gets kind of a little bit of a nearby location advantage there throughout this grouping here. Kansas and Arkansas. Kansas is a 4.5-point favorite here, and I think you got to kind of lean towards Kansas, man. I would think, even though they're down from 5 to 4.5, I don't know if the public is going to look at this and see, oh, Kansas, I got to pick Kansas here because I know the name. I mean, everybody knows Kansas had a really bad year, and they're down to a 7 seed. And if you look at like Ken Palm's rankings, they're not that bad. They still rank out, like I think in the top 20 or 25 maybe or so. They're definitely good defensively. They definitely have offensive problems at times, and I hate Hunter Dickinson. I like seeing Kansas lose, but they still have the experience there. Kansas probably remembers an early exit from the tournament last year because they had massive injuries. Dickinson and McCullers, I think was the other guy's name. They were both injured last year. I don't even know if McCullers is still on the team, but Dickinson is obviously back. So they do have experience. They have the experienced coach, although obviously Arkansas has Calipari. He has experience as well. Arkansas might be getting Boogie Flanders. Is that his name? He's one of their better players, and he might actually be back for this game, so that should help Arkansas. It's an interesting matchup. I kind of lean towards Kansas just because the pedigree is there, and I know Calipari obviously has a lot of tournament pedigree, but with this group of guys, he doesn't as much, so maybe they won't coalesce as much, and I think everybody's going to be I think people are going to be down on Kansas, but we got to see like how this kind of plays out as far as like where the market read is going to be and whatever. And then St. John's is playing Omaha. I know I've talked about how overrated Omaha is, or they're not as good as their record makes them look. They still ran through the Summit tournament, and they may be excited to be here because it's their first time in the tournament in program history. Excuse me as I inhale water here, which I did on Tower Game a couple of weeks ago too. Oh my God. Excuse me. St. John's seems like they're a really trendy pick, man. I mean, they've come from out of nowhere. They got Rick Pitino. I mean, they almost made the tournament last year. He's obviously a coach with a lot of history behind him, but not a lot of recent history behind him at the very least. Although, of course, he was coaching at some lesser programs as well. But St. John's seems like a very, very trendy pick to me, to the point where maybe I don't love them, and they have kind of lopsided metrics. I know they're really good, and they looked really good in the Big East tournament. All of their losses, they only have 4 losses, and all of their losses are by like 4 or fewer points or something. So they really have not been an easy team to beat. They have a weird like combination of like metrics where they play fast, but they play really good defense. They turn you over a lot, and they don't take a lot of threes and don't shoot that well. But I think the fact that they don't shoot well is kind of going to be what takes them out of this tournament, man, because the teams that really, really make it like all the way tend to not be teams that profile like St. John's, where they're like so defensively lopsided that they're really good defensively, but it's at the point where their offense just isn't good enough to carry them through. And teams that play as fast-paced as they tend to do don't tend to make it through the entire thing because your legs get tired when you have to run through this whole tournament, even though I know you get like a week break in between those. But if we get St. John's up against Texas Tech, which is a team that can play defense basically as good as they can and can slow it down, I think I would kind of like Texas Tech to get through that. So Texas Tech, they're a dangerous team, man. I could see Texas Tech maybe getting through this region even, man. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say that I lean to every 1 seed getting through these regions, although I do think we're looking at kind of a top-heavy year where there is kind of a gap after, like, the absolute best teams of Florida. I think there was a little bit too much hype there, even though they do profile analytically as a team that can win the championship with a good balance between offense and defense, very good at both. Texas Tech also kind of profiles that way, and I could see Texas Tech maybe coming out of this region and maybe like them more than St. John's because of their lopsided profile. So we'll see what we do. I mean, I'm going to come back. Obviously, my daily videos, I'm going to talk about what I'm actually betting, and I'll probably do a video where I actually show how I fill out my bracket and build it backwards, just like myself. I build the brackets backwards, man, based on like game theory metrics. Once we get more of those metrics out, and we'll figure it out. But quick turnaround time, man. The first 4 games start Tuesday. So really we only have tonight and then Monday to kind of analyze this. But I think I've done a decent amount of analysis tonight. Hopefully you guys just enjoy listening to me, and maybe it'll help you with some of your bracket, filling out your brackets, or maybe I'm just dead wrong about everything. Who knows? I don't know who I would pick as a champion yet right now, man. That's going to, as far as picking a champion in the bracket, it's got to be based on your pool size. And again, like which team is being underpicked amongst those teams that I think can win the whole thing. And I really think the teams that can win the whole thing, it's a really narrow group. It's Auburn, Duke, Houston, Florida, even though I think that preseason rankings metric, the history is kind of against it being Florida. And then I think Clemson might actually meet the metrics. I forget if Texas Tech does, although I think they're close. It, like, if you look at Ken Palm's ranking, it's got to be a team that's like really, really balanced. And in like I said, like I think basically top 25 offensive efficiency on Ken Palm and like top 38 or so defensive efficiency is kind of what you want to look for, that real balance there. And you kind of want to exclude teams that are too fast paced as well. Though usually the teams that are too fast paced don't meet the defensive requirement, like Alabama. They don't meet the defensive requirement, so I will not be picking Alabama. And actually, I think Gonzaga, actually, I don't know, their defensive efficiency might not be good enough. I was going to say they might actually be close. Actually, let me bring it up. Why not? While we have time here. Oh, I have to share my screen again if I do this. Hang on. Let's actually look right now, because this is what you want to do. You want to look at it before the tournament starts, or maybe after. It's fine to look at it after the first 4 games are finished, because it's not going to change that much. But we'll look at Ken Palm real quick. And again, like I said, it's worth buying Ken Palm. I mean, he only charges like $25 or $30 a year. So it's really nothing. And you get cool metrics, some cool actually bracketology stuff as well. I think he gives you like percentage chance to like get through certain rounds. As you can see here, Ohio State is the best metrics team left out of the tournament. And they're actually pretty balanced too. Very unlucky, very unfortunate. Northwestern also very unlucky. And then SMU, Indiana down here, Boise State, and then West Virginia. So all of those teams were mentioned as bubble teams except for Northwestern. And then North Carolina's up here at 33, and they got in. And then where's Texas was the other team that everybody was complaining about. They're down at 44th, but they're pretty balanced as well. And like I said, Ken Palm has Texas and Xavier really, really close to each other, man. So I'm kind of surprised Xavier's a 2.5-point favorite, unless there's some injury that I don't know about on Texas. Because Ken Palm basically is telling you it should be about a pick 'em in that game. So we will see. And he's got Colorado State 9 ranking spots higher than Memphis, by the way. And Memphis more lucky, 20th luckiest team in the country. And Colorado State, like I said, a slowdown team. And actually, Colorado State top 50 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, man. Nice balance there. Colorado State, man, make a run to the Sweet 16, baby, because we always get, there's always like at least one double-digit seed that makes the Sweet 16, man. And you don't want to like take that much of a risk if you're in small bracket pools to try to like guess which team that's going to be, but maybe it'll be that team. And maybe it'll be Colorado State. It's usually some team people don't expect at all. UC San Diego, definitely balanced. Like I said, although I just think they're too trendy, man. But they do profile as a good upset candidate. Like I said, they're a slow-paced team. They shoot pretty well. They shoot a lot of threes, and they actually play good defense as well. Unlike last year, they played too fast, and their defense wasn't as good. So let's look at the teams that meet the championship requirements. Duke, like I said, obviously is 1-3-4. Florida's at 1-10. So maybe a little bit too offensively lopsided, but they definitely meet the requirements. Houston, maybe too defensively lopsided, but really not by that much. 10-2, that's good. Auburn's 2-12, so that meets the requirement. Tennessee, I thought they wouldn't meet the requirement offensively, but they actually do meet the requirement. And Alabama, I think maybe just sneaks in if you open it up to like the 35. So I don't know, man. Texas Tech is just outside of it. Michigan State does meet the requirements, although they're pretty lopsided. All of these teams are pretty lopsided, man. The least lopsided team is Duke, unfortunately. But for Duke, I just don't know if I see it, man, because it's John Shire. I mean, he hasn't been there that long. He doesn't really have that coaching pedigree yet. They faced a weak conference schedule in the ACC. I know, like, analytically, that yeah, they do profile out really well, but they do have like a lot of freshmen on that team, so lack of experience. I don't know, man. And then actually Maryland and Wisconsin are actually kind of close to meeting the requirement. Arizona's pretty close. But you want to try to start excluding these teams. Clemson actually looks very nice. Balanced there, 24-16. So kind of surprising. And then other than that, I mean, none of the other teams like below that are teams that I would really look at. Ole Miss actually looks nicely balanced. But again, it might be a little bit difficult for them to beat North Carolina when they don't know what's coming, man. So I don't know. But as far as the championship pick, I mean, I think it's going to be Duke, Florida, Houston, Auburn, Tennessee. I would probably still throw out Alabama. I'd throw out Tennessee too, just because I don't think their offense is actually good enough. Alabama, I would probably exclude as well because I don't think their defense is good enough. Maybe Michigan State still is in there. Gonzaga, yeah, their defense isn't that bad, but I don't know. And actually, Iowa State profiles to meet those requirements as well. I forgot about them. And I guess Maryland, I think, doesn't quite meet the offensive requirements. And Wisconsin, I think, meets the requirements as well. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's tough to gauge right now. But then you want to look at like which team has the best odds that's being underpicked. So it's probably going to be, it could be Auburn, it could be Houston. One of those teams that's being underpicked is probably going to be the pick. Yeah, man. I'm giving Ken Pump free advertisements. What's Ned? Booby Flanders. Yeah, I don't know what his real name is. I assume Booby is a nickname. Should be my nickname for my affinity for titties. So build backwards. That's right. Thanks for hanging out, guys. That's going to do it for me for now. Hopefully this was entertaining at least and gives some good information. That's going to do it. I'll be back tomorrow with some bets that hopefully don't lose. It'll be a short card tomorrow, though. I think there's no college basketball at all. And then there probably like just a little bit of NBA and NHL, so who knows. I think Tuesday MLB starts with those stupid early season Korea games, which I'm not going to put my money on those either, but I might talk about them, so we'll see. That's going to do it. Peace out, guys, and I'll be back. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter and patreon.com/Tower Gang to support the most offensive, hilarious podcast out there, man. You get bonus content for sure. Peace. Have a good night, guys. Yeah, you too, man. Peace out.